Sometimes there are days that pass through our lives very quietly, yet leave echoes that last for a long time. January 11th, 2026 is one of those days for Cancer. Not loud, not dramatic. But if you are a Cancer, you will feel it. A vague pressure in your chest, an old memory rising for no clear reason. A sensation as if your heart is being touched right at its most sensitive place. In these early days of the month, your emotions don't feel random at all. They feel deeper, slower, more real. The universe isn't doing this to test you. It's preparing a very precise healing, a kind of delicate operation on something you've been carrying for years, maybe even decades. And when a wound begins to speak, that's not the moment to run. That's the moment to listen. Because this is not an ordinary day for Cancer. Cancer doesn't love the way thrill seekers do. You love through presence, through staying, through the smallest, quietest gestures, the ones you believe others will feel, even when you never say a word. Deep inside, you carry a silent belief that when you are needed enough, important enough, irreplaceable enough, you will be safe inside someone's heart. That belief wasn't born from weakness. It formed early. In moments when you learn to read the atmosphere of a room. When you learned to adjust your emotions to keep the peace. When you learned how to be the one who supports, long before you learned how to be the one held. Cancer grows up with a rare ability. You feel what others feel before they even realize it themselves. You know who is hurting even while they're smiling. You know who is leaving even while they're still standing there. And because you feel so deeply, you choose to love through protection. Protecting others from pain, protecting relationships from cracks, protecting connection through quiet sacrifice. You become the shelter. You become the home. You become the one who stays a little longer, gives a little more, endures just a little further. The problem isn't that you love the wrong way. The problem is that you learn to love as if your existence only has value when you are needed. When no one leans on you, unease creeps in. When no one needs saving, emptiness follows. And so you give again. You step closer, even when your heart is already tired. You lower your boundaries just to keep the connection from breaking. Over time, that love stops feeling like a river that nourishes. It becomes a golden cage, beautiful, warm, but enclosed and heavy. Those cages don't lock you in with steel. They lock you in with usefulness, with thank yous, with grateful eyes. And Cancer, who longs so deeply to belong, often confuses being needed with being loved. You tell yourself you're fine, that giving is happiness, that as long as the other person is okay, you can carry a little more. But underneath, a part of you grows quieter. The part that isn't asked about, the part that isn't gently held, the part that isn't allowed to be soft because if you weaken, who will carry everything else? The true wound of Cancer isn't loving too much. It's forgetting that you too deserve to be loved without having to pay for it. Forgetting that safety doesn't come from becoming indispensable in someone else's life, but from being able to stand steady even when no one needs you in that moment. When this truth begins to surface, the first feeling isn't comfort. It can feel like loss, like sadness, like a quiet fear whispering, if I stop giving, will anyone stay? But inside that stillness, another kind of light appears. A new understanding. That love is not self-erasure. That lasting connection isn't built on exhaustion. That you don't need to be everyone's shelter to deserve a home of your own. The Cancer heart is an ocean, and an ocean doesn't dry up just because it stops pouring itself outward. It grows deeper when it learns to hold. As you begin to look back at how you love, not to blame yourself, but to understand, something important quietly shifts. You start placing yourself back at the center of your emotional world. Not through selfishness, but through respect. Respect for your limits, respect for your needs. Respect even for the days when you don't have the strength to hold anyone but yourself. And from that place, a new current begins to move. Lighter, clearer, more honest. It no longer asks you to sacrifice yourself to stay. It simply invites you forward, with a heart that is still warm, but no longer willing to wound itself just to keep someone close. Cancer begins to feel a very real pressure, closing in from many directions at once. Not a loud pressure, not the kind that sends you into panic, but the feeling of being held between two opposing currents, where the heart is no longer allowed to hide inside old habits. On one side, there is Capricorn energy. Cool, clear, grounded in reality, unwilling to look away from the truth. On the other, Jupiter is retrograde inside you, stirring deep emotional needs, the longing to be protected, to feel safe, to belong. These two forces aren't pulling you away from yourself. They are asking you to stand still and look honestly at how your way of loving has been operating for a very long time. The question doesn't arrive loudly. It's quiet, but persistent. Are you loving from a place of fullness, or from the fear that if you stop giving, everything will leave? Cancer is especially skilled at hiding the answer to this question, even from yourself. You've learned how to justify sacrifice, how to call exhaustion devotion, how to treat burnout as proof of love. But the energy right now won't let you keep passing over the signs. It illuminates the smallest details of your relationships, the extra responsibilities you take on at work, the emotional weight you carry for the people you love, silently, without complaint. What unsettles Cancer isn't realizing that you give too much. You've known that for a long time. What truly shakes you is beginning to see the cost. Boundaries worn thin over the years. Personal desires pushed quietly aside. Moments when you stayed silent, even while storms raged inside, just to keep the surface calm. Capricorn doesn't allow you to disappear into vague emotion. This energy asks directly, are these relationships truly strong, or are they standing only because of one-sided endurance? Jupiter in Cancer doesn't blame you. It simply magnifies everything, so you can no longer pretend you're fine. You begin to notice a subtle truth. Every time you give beyond your limits, you aren't just hurting yourself. You are teaching others how to treat you. You are building an image of someone who is always available, always strong, always okay without reciprocity. And when you finally need space, that environment has grown used to not making room for you. The cosmic pressure right now is not meant to harden you. It isn't turning you cold or closed, it's inviting you to mature in love. Maturity doesn't mean loving less. It means knowing when to stop. It means understanding that fullness doesn't come from how much you do for others, but from how much of yourself you still allow yourself to keep. When love comes from the fear of abandonment, it always carries tension, carefulness, a quiet anxiety that something could disappear at any moment. But when love comes from fullness, it becomes freer. You don't cling, you don't control. You don't exhaust yourself trying to be worthy. Cancer is standing at a very important threshold. You are being invited to review the entire belief system that has guided your relationships. Beliefs that once helped you survive, that once helped you stay connected, may no longer fit the person you are becoming. And the beautiful thing is, you don't have to tear everything down. You only need to adjust. Gently. Honestly. Just enough to give your heart room to breathe. When you allow yourself to question how you love, a door opens very quietly. A door to a different kind of safety. Not safety because you are indispensable, but safety because you no longer abandon yourself. And within that subtle shift, you begin to feel a new foundation forming inside. A foundation no longer built on fear, but on a deep understanding of your true worth. A foundation no longer built on fear, but on a deep understanding of your true worth. And as that foundation begins to form, even very quietly, Cancer starts to notice something shift inside. Your emotions move differently now. No longer like hidden undercurrents, restless beneath the surface, but like a clear tide rising, impossible to ignore. These feelings aren't arriving to confuse you. They are arriving to be seen, to be touched, to be acknowledged. To recognize that there are parts of your heart that haven't truly been allowed to stay with themselves for a very long time. The emotions may surface suddenly. A morning where you wake up with heaviness behind your eyes. An evening that feels strangely quiet, even though the world around you is full of sound. Ordinary moments, yet inside them, something unmistakably real begins to speak. You no longer brush your feelings aside the way you used to. You no longer say, "It's fine, it will pass." Instead, you begin to sit more still with what's happening inside. No rushing to name it, no rushing to fix it, just allowing yourself to feel it fully, even when it's uncomfortable. When you stay with your emotions long enough, clarity begins to emerge naturally, without force. You start to look back at past relationships through a different lens. Less blame, less self-judgment, just a deep understanding that you loved in the best way you knew how at the time. But understanding doesn't mean continuing. Understanding means choosing differently. You begin to recognize the pattern. The times you stepped forward even when your heart was already tired. The times you said yes while your body was quietly whispering no. The times you hoped that if you tried just a little harder, things would finally change. This clarity doesn't arrive like a blow. It comes gently, like morning light slipping through a curtain. Not overwhelming, but bright enough that returning to the old darkness is no longer possible. You realize that staying with your emotions doesn't make you weaker. It gives you a different kind of strength. Strong because you're no longer running from yourself. Strong because you no longer need someone else to validate your worth in this moment. And from that steadiness, a new choice appears. Not the choice to please others, not the familiar choice of safety through habit, but a choice rooted in self-respect. Maybe it's the first time you don't respond immediately to a message that makes you feel pressured. The first time you say you need more time. The first time you don't rush to fix someone else's emotions while your own inner waters are already full. From the outside, these actions may seem small, but inside, they represent a profound shift. You no longer feel the need to save someone in order to feel valuable. You no longer feel guilty for placing your needs first. You no longer confuse love with endurance. Love no longer feels like constant effort to keep everything from falling apart. It becomes a space where both people can breathe. A space where you can stay without bracing yourself. A space where you can leave without losing who you are. And something else begins to happen. As you start loving with boundaries, the world responds differently. Relationships that no longer fit become clear on their own. No drama. No conflict. Simply a quiet knowing that you no longer have the energy to continue the same way. And healthier connections begin to find room to appear. People who respect your silence. People who don't require your sacrifice in order to stay. People who see you, not just for what you do for them, but for who you are. In this very quiet transformation, Cancer begins to feel something you rarely allowed yourself to believe before. That love doesn't have to hurt to be real. That safety doesn't come from holding on tightly, but from standing steady inside your own emotional truth. And when your heart learns how to rest without fear, another door in your love life begins to open. Not loudly, not with grand promises, but deep enough for you to know you are entering a very different space. A space where love is no longer an exchange, but a true meeting between two whole human beings. And when you've gone far enough in listening to yourself, a very simple truth begins to surface. Not like a lesson being taught, but like a familiar memory gently returning. You suddenly remember that your worth was never tied to whether someone needed you or not. It was always there. Before you learned how to care for others. Before you became the one people leaned on. Before you even understood what love was. Over time, through moments where you had to grow strong too early, you forgot this truth. And in its place, a quiet belief took root. That you had to do something, give something, endure something, in order to deserve being kept. The truth the universe is asking you to remember carries no judgment. It doesn't say you were wrong. It simply places a gentle hand on your shoulder and reminds you that you've been trying long enough. You don't need to exhaust yourself to prove that your love is real. Love has never been measured by how much you sacrifice or how many times you swallow your own feelings. It's felt through presence, through the sense of peace that exists when two people are together, through the freedom for both to be themselves without fearing the loss of connection. As you begin to feel emotionally full, everything around you shifts, almost imperceptibly. You stop chasing. You stop guessing what more you need to do so someone won't leave. Your energy softens, yet becomes clearer. You're no longer sending signals that ask to be held. You're radiating a sense of safety from the inside out. And that, more than necessity, is what truly attracts. Not because of lack, but because of fullness. In this state of fullness, you start to see love differently. No longer as a place to hide from loneliness. No longer as a coat to cover the empty spaces within. Love becomes a gift freely given, not a price paid to purchase safety. You give because you want to, not because you're afraid to lose. You stay because you choose to, not because you're afraid to leave. And the person beside you can feel the difference. They don't feel weighed down by your sacrifice. They feel invited into a healthy relationship, one where both people can stand on their own ground. This doesn't make you love less. It allows your love to mature. Cancer's tenderness doesn't disappear. It simply no longer comes at the cost of self-erasure. You still care deeply. You're still intuitive, still emotionally rich. But now, you know how to return to yourself before rushing outward. You know how to pause when your body speaks. You understand that self-care is not selfishness, but the foundation that allows you to love someone long-term without running empty. And when this truth truly settles in, a quiet peace spreads through you. Not the kind of peace that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind that comes from no longer fighting yourself. You don't need to be needed to feel that you exist. You exist, and that is enough. From that enough, you begin to move through relationships with a different rhythm. Slower, steadier, more honest. You allow love to come closer without trading away your inner safety. You allow yourself to be loved without paying for it with exhaustion. As this truth sinks in, without noise, without announcement, it quietly creates a new space inside you. A space where you no longer have to prove, no longer have to hold on, no longer have to live in fear. And within this gentle, light-filled stillness, the Cancer heart begins to open in a new way. Ready to receive connections built on respect, on freedom, and on a solid foundation that took you a very long time to find again. And then, after all those quiet inner movements, Cancer begins to walk through love with a different rhythm. There's no deliberate effort to change. Yet you notice you no longer stay in spaces that leave your heart exhausted. Relationships that once drained your energy suddenly come into focus. No more confusion, no more excuses. You sense their limits not through judgment, but through something very real in your body. In those spaces, you can't breathe deeply. In those spaces, you're always bracing yourself. And simply recognizing that is enough to release the need to force yourself to stay. The emotions that once triggered you so easily, that once pulled you back into old loops, no longer hold the same power. They still appear, but they no longer carry you away. You observe them like distant waves offshore, knowing they will rise and then fall. You no longer feel the need to react immediately. No need to explain, no need to prove. For the first time, a precious space appears between feeling and action. And within that space, you have choice. Cancer begins to choose love. Not from lack, not from fear of loneliness, not from the anxiety that if you don't hold on, everything will disappear. You choose love because you want to share. Because you feel safe enough within yourself to open your heart. Because you understand that the most beautiful love is not where you lose yourself, but where you become more fully who you are. That choice carries a quiet power. No noise, no declarations. Yet it changes completely how you enter and how you remain in relationships. The people who enter your life during this time feel the difference as well. They don't sense that you need them to survive. They feel that you choose them. And that choice creates a very different foundation. A foundation of respect, of freedom, of two people standing side by side because they want to, not because they're afraid. You no longer love by dissolving yourself. You love through presence. You are still gentle, still deep, still emotionally perceptive, but you no longer disappear in the process. This new cycle of love doesn't promise that everything will be easy, but it offers something far more valuable. Peace within your own emotional world. You no longer need to guess what you must do to be allowed to stay. You no longer need to sacrifice before being loved. You step into love with both feet on the ground, with an open heart, but not an empty one. And from that place, you allow yourself to receive what you once rarely dared to hope for. A quiet maturity is unfolding within Cancer. Maturity doesn't mean becoming harder. It means becoming soft in the right places. It doesn't mean closing your heart. It means opening it with discernment. You learn that respecting yourself doesn't make you less loving. It makes your love stronger, deeper, and more real. You stop chasing the feeling of being needed. You return to the feeling of being yourself. And in that return, a very gentle reminder echoes inside you. Not something to memorize, but something to live with each day. That you are whole within yourself. That your love is a voluntary offering, born from fullness, not a price paid to be allowed to stay. When you walk forward carrying that truth in your heart, the path ahead opens differently. No longer a search for safety outside of you, but a sharing of the safety that already lives within. And this is the beginning of a new way of loving. One where Cancer no longer fears love, but stands steady enough to love fully, freely, and with quiet worth.